I want to basically thank all of the speakers. For those who can remain, we do have time now for a Q&A and discussion session, whereby I think there are actually a number of questions that have already been posed in the chat, which my colleague, Mr. Askari, probably has a good picture of.
We do have a question which was on the China-Europe Express Railway corridor, and His Excellency Ambassador Mironchik had taken the initiative to answer that question. Maybe we can start with that. It's a question from Mr. Alf Johansson. He says, how will the sanctions against Russia and Belarus influence the development and operation of the BRI corridors towards Europe? Will there be missing links, or will new routes emerge? Ambassador Mironchik.
Thank you very much. There were several questions, several points raised by distinguished speakers, which are of particular interest to my mind. As for the connectivity, Belarus has never been the initiator of sanctions, and we deeply regret that illegal sanctions are being used against sovereign countries. According to the UN Charter, the only acceptable form of sanctions are sanctions introduced by the UN Security Council. What we do is we do everything possible to minimize negative influence of sanctions on third countries and keep intact those projects which still connect us and which create background for positive cooperation and hope for change and for the better. Belt and Road project is being at the core. I'm happy to say that so far our efforts to preserve it from negative impact of the current political disagreements between the West and Belarus have been quite successful. And as for the flows of goods through a railway corridor going through Russia and Belarus towards the West, these flows have not diminished, to say the least. We are doing our best to expand possibilities, and Minsk indeed serves a hub for railway transportation between Europe and Western China. Indeed, in reality, I sometimes when I try to give a helping hand both to Swedish and to Belarusian companies wishing to make use of this connectivity, I have to make an extra effort to find a spare slot so that they can add additional goods to the current flows, to the existing flows. If I may make two short remarks on other topics, on the topic of the vaccines, or we will come that to later stage, at a later stage, Mr. Askari.
No, you go ahead. Let me just read the question itself. It was from Mr. Henry Tillman from the China Investment Research. He said over the past 2 years, the BRI has moved to global health vaccine in 33 countries, 23 renewable projects, 25 countries, 10, he's mentioning the number $70 billion in 2022, no loans, only investments, but majority equity investment in industrial manufacturing. None of this is in the Western press. But you might want to address the question of the vaccine co-production project. as part of the health Silk Road, which we had the discussions about before.
I can share a first-hand experience of Belarus in this regard and make some comparisons, which I consider to be unfortunate for our Swedish hosts. Back in 2020, at the height of the pandemic, Belarus, as other smaller nations, was looking for a possibility to vaccinate its population as soon as possible. We were eager to buy any vaccine available. Of course, Sweden is proud to be a co-founder and co-host world-famous pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca. That's why fairly shortly after the beginning of the pandemic and right after, we got information that AstraZeneca is successful in creating vaccines. I got official instructions from my capital to get in touch with the company and to negotiate with them import of vaccines. I did just that. Yet our request was it took a very long time for AstraZeneca Sweden to handle the request, and they only referred it to regional office of AstraZeneca, where it took even longer time to process it, and then we received a formal answer, which can be watered down to a simple no, we are not selling. It wasn't whether they are ready to sell it now or in the future, or if they want to get more money for us from us for the vaccines. It was a blank no, we are not selling. At the same time, since the beginning of the pandemic, we received 5 million doses of vaccines from China as a donation. And we started receiving these vaccines virtually immediately after they were accepted for usage in China domestically. These vaccines saved a lot of lives, and these vaccines proved to be effective. And we also bought 4.6 million doses of the vaccines. Again, we continue receiving these vaccines as a support, as a donation from China. And most recently, there was another tranche of 2 million doses. So I think that China is leading by example when it comes to vaccines. I would also like to echo what Professor Cheng said. This in-depth analysis of regional development in China indeed helps to understand the logic and the directions of the development of Chinese foreign policy and economic cooperation. And we took a very early note of this shift of focus in Chinese policies towards continental provinces, towards Western China. It is then when we saw additional possibilities for ourselves to get connected and to develop cooperation. And that's where Belt and Road initiative started, really. It went from the internal Chinese logic and got a very pronounced foreign dimension. And now regional cooperation plays a very important role in the cooperation between Belarus as a country and China as a country. And we put a special stress on cooperation with the regions of Western China. This indeed brings an additional dynamic, additional momentum into our cooperation with the People's Republic of China. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I would just like to add one point to the question on the China-Europe Express Railway from our own research, because sometimes it's quite useful that Western media does not discuss the Belt and Road Initiative because they get everything wrong. So what happened when the Ukraine crisis broke out, the Western media, think tanks, it was full with articles and reports that Mr. Putin has killed the new Silk Road or the Eurasian Silk Road. So what we did is we actually went and looked at what rail companies and shipping companies were doing at the time, instead of looking at what the media is reporting. And then we had this article on the matter. What we discovered is that actually at the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine, yes, there was a small pause in the shipment of goods from the west to the east, but it never stopped from the east to the west. One important point which we also highlighted, which everybody else ignored, is that this China-Europe Express Railway is so important, and it has become such a great vehicle of economic cooperation, supply chain support. It was impossible for the EU to impose sanctions on the Belarus and Russian railway companies. So the Belarus and Russian railway companies were exempt from the sanctions. There were no sanctions on the railway sector in Russia and Belarus. And while others were trying to find alternative routes, they actually failed, because this is the most seamless and most effective route to bring goods, especially high technology products, to Europe and from Europe to China. So it was fascinating to see that this route not only continued, but actually this year it's going to grow compared to other years, although not at the same pace, because as we have reported, the China-Europe Railway Express has gone from 170 trains per year in 2011 to 15,000 trains last year. This year it will increase, but only by 3–4%, but it is not dead, it's not finished, as the media here are trying to portray. And this shows how important this connectivity between China, Europe, China, and other parts of the world has become as an important part of the globalization and economic cooperation among nations.
Just a very small point, and we never politicize this topic. We never view it as a card to play. This is something which unites us, and when I say us, I am speaking beyond Belarus and beyond China as well. Thank you.
Maybe just add a little bit of complication to the discussion. In my interviews, with people who are working very closely in Germany, receiving these trains, I think that the change, I think, has been up and down. But for Duisburg, which receives the largest number of trains from China, at its peak was about 60 trains a week last year. But now that number has come down quite a bit, and to about 30, between 30 and 40. So there's a fairly strong impact. But that impact, I think, has been very uneven and partially been offset by more trains originating from more cities within China to Central Asia. So the China Central Asia connections and have been strengthened. And also, I think when the Chinese government accounts the total number of trains, and now they have broadened the category, the definition to include, obviously, the fourth category, the fourth regional segment that I talked about, which are the trains that are now through the land and sea combined corridors going to Southeast Asia. But if you look at, the number of European cities receiving the trains, and that number has increased over time. In other words, there are more trains that are going to Europe, but not necessarily to the original smaller number of hub cities. So they have been distributed more broadly, but there's been some negative impact on the operation of the trains, not only because of the war. I think a lot of it has to do with some of the technical challenges of clearing the trains across the crucial hubs on the borders, that in some way you could think about them as choke points. And that's why Kazakhstan has been upgrading Atakal and Dosek, these two crucial border rail stations, because right now they process maybe 15 trains a day, but they would like to get to 60 trains a day. So if you can improve those critical points, including Brest in Belarus, right, and Malashwitz on the city between Belarus and Poland, then I think that will help further mitigate, some of the difficulty and challenges in how fast and these trains can cross these multiple borders.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Askari, are there more questions?
No, I think we have summed up many of the questions.
Okay.
So if the other panelists have something to say or want to comment, Ambassador Cui, if you want to comment on what has been discussed here, you are welcome to do that.
Yes, please, Ambassador.
做个评论。刚才听完了各位这个嘉宾呢和这个学者专家们的一些发言呢，我感到这个非常的有收获。 有体会，因为大家从很多不同的角度都这个有独特的这个视角和精辟的见解，谈到了很多这个关于“一带一路”发展方面的这个一些认识和看法。
I had the pleasure to listening to the presentations made by the guests and scholars. I have learned quite a lot from these presentations. They gave me insights into the development of Belt and Road from your very special and own perspectives.
这不但让我们更好的开展“一带一路”的有关建设，更好的实现呢这个共商共建共享的这么个原则和宗旨，这个更有信心和底气。同时啊，也让我们找到了更好的跟大家共同推进。 这个“一带一路”建设的有关的这个办法，或者说是这个在这方面有更好的一个沟通的一个能力和发展的一个前景。
Your presentations give me confidence in promoting the work on the BRI for shared benefits through collaboration and discussion, and gave me better opportunities for communication on making efforts together to promoting the BRI.
我们将高举和平发展和共赢的这个旗帜，坚持和平发展、公平、正义、民主、自由的全人类这个共同价值，这个在这个相互尊重这个和平相处和互利共赢的基础上把这个。 “一带一路”这个工程这个倡议给它实施好、发展好，把这个我们未来的世界建造成，就是我们习近平总书记所提到的永久和平、持续的安全、共同的繁荣，是吧？开放包容和清洁美丽的这么一个世界，我们要贡献出我们新的力量。我相信呢，这个中华民族的伟大复兴。 不仅仅是中国人自己的事情，而且也必将给整个全世界、全人类的发展带来更大的机遇它将造福各国和各国人民。谢谢。再一次借这个机会呢，感谢这个主席先生、副主席先生、各位阁下以及我们所有的嘉宾、所有的专家学者和所有的参加线上讨论的这个朋友们对这一类建设的关心和支持。谢谢大家。
We will continue to hold high the banner of peace, development, and win-win cooperation. We will continue to be committed to the shared values of humanity, of peace, development, fairness, justice, democracy, and freedom. We will continue to develop the BRI well, based on principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win benefits. And we will strive to build the world of the future into what President Xi Jinping has described as a world of lasting peace, shared security, a world that is clean and beautiful. We are confident that the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation will continue to make greater contributions to the development of this world. I'd like to thank all of you again, the guests, scholars, and chairman and vice chairman of BRIX for hosting this event, and I'd also like to thank the friends online for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador Shui, both for your concluding remarks and your very important presentation on the important results and ideas of the 20th National Congress, for all the people who hopefully will hear some of this in Sweden and understand something about the results and the implications that they otherwise are not getting any adequate information, or unfortunately no information at all in principle. Professor Lee.
Yes, and I do not have any further comments. I saw one comment on my presentation. This listener, he or she wants to have a copy of my PPT, so I have already done it. I'm very effective. So I think that this is a very good event. And also I'm very happy to see my friends, Professor Chen Xiaoming, also on board. I think that in the future that I expect Banner Road Institute is going to organize more seminars like this to spread our values, common understanding on Banner Road. As I emphasize, I do not see, I want to echo Stephen's word again, that I do not see a lot of news about Banner Road, and also any news regarding what President Professor Chen Xiaoming has told us. He gave a very detailed spreading presentation on all kind of connectivities. Who knows these informations? I don't think any of our citizens know very much apart from this seminar where we try to disseminate all these knowledges. So I really hope that you, Stephen, and Hussein are going to organize more events like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. And we will organize many more webinars like this in the coming year. We will celebrate the anniversary of the 10th year of the Belt and Road. And we will, in my view, optimistically, not simply, but with a lot of hard work, we will break this censorship. And if these countries in Europe love to talk about freedom, they're going to have to actually open the channels for a true and open dialogue on these ideas and these points of view, which at the moment they are not willing to do. So our work will continue unabated. It will not stop. It will continue to go forward. And with all of the support we have from our speakers, Professor Chen, I didn't see you before. Did you have some concluding words? Your presentation has already been remarked as very important for the public to understand how these dynamics are going forward. We will do our best to make that information available in Sweden, despite the difficulties. But this webinar will be promoted on YouTube, so everybody can share and spread it. But if you had something more you wanted to add, Professor Chen?
Yeah, just a couple of final words to thank you and Hussein and distinguished guests, including the Excellency Ambassador Cui, and good to see you again. I think we had an earlier seminar together. I think Professor Lee and others who obviously have written a lot about the BRI, from a political economy, international relations perspective. I've learned a lot from that body of work. And I think my own approach to this obviously reflects my background and training as a student and scholar of cities and regional development. I think this is sort of an area or part of the intellectual discourse on the BRI that is beginning to emerge, through more scholarly work among some geographers, actually quite a bit of a few of them in Europe. I've recently been asked to review a proposed book about the material, physical, infrastructural impact and imprints of the BRI. So that's a good sign that, scholars are turning towards the BRI by looking at all of these already spatialized, but emerging geographic connections across a lot more cities that previously were not connected. I think BRI has done something, cumulatively, but something very significantly of bringing in more cities, particular cities in some developing countries, in the developing parts of the world, and even the decline, deindustrialized cities in the advanced European world together to form a increasingly global network of cities and regions. And that kind of connection at that scale ultimately matters most to the lives of the people living in these cities. And that's why I think that we need to really, keep our eyes on the ground and how BRI actually impacts and transforms, urban development, livelihoods, opportunities, for people who otherwise have been left behind and have not been fully integrated into the better results of a more connected global economy.
And Stefan, one more point from my side, that is that I want to congratulate Hussein for his article on analyzing the debt issue of Sri Lanka. Now I begin to hear a lot of people in Europe begin to talk about the Chinese debt is only 1/3 or 1/4 of the total debt. Now people begin to realize, because when I heard a lot of Belt and Road, they are connected with the new imperialism, new colonialism, and debt trap. So I think I want to congratulate you, Belt and Road Institute, for disseminating proper knowledge to enlighten people, to correct people's understanding. And this is a marvelous job you have done. Okay, this is my final comment.
Thank you, Professor Lee. And I fully agree. My colleague, Mr. Askari, is doing a fantastic job in putting together the real facts and making sure that they are getting out to the people who otherwise are not receiving them. And we will continue that work in the coming period by all means, with the help of all of you. I think this, from the comments I've been seeing on the chat, this has been, some people are referring to this as the most successful webinar, the most dynamic that we have had up until now. I think that's very true, that this is an extremely effective and dynamic discussion, and the results of which I hope will spread widely here in Sweden and around the west of Europe and the world. And I want to thank everybody who participated. And I hope to have more of this kind of dynamic discussion in the coming year, in 2023. So I'm very happy. I think it's a very successful event, and I want to thank, well, I don't, one last point might be, Mr. Askari, if you had seen the statement from Mr. Vesby that he wants to introduce, I believe, to the Norwegian Chamber of Commerce, if that's not incorrect.
Yes, he writes one of the best, if not the best, BRICS seminars when it finally got started. All excellent speakers, thank you. He also says, I will promote it at the NCCC, the Norway-China Chamber of Commerce meeting tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Turavetsky.
Excellent. That is the type of spreading of knowledge that we will continue to work for. So thank you for that. And otherwise, I want to thank everybody again. And I think at this point, we will close the webinar for this occasion.